be a collection of articles on how to legally overthrow the U.S. government.
Mm-hmm.
And Jim got this invitation, and Jim had me write an article under his byline. And what I wrote was called was Overthrowing the Secret Government, in which I maintained that there was a conspiracy, a high cabal that ran the means of owned, possessed, and controlled, ran the means of making wealth in the country.
Right.
And that if you didn't take them out, but that didn't matter what sort of administration you would put in, as long as they owned the stuff, they would simply buy whatever new government you put in place and own them just the way they own the current one.
Right. It doesn't matter which one is on the surface, so to speak, because people are not targeting the root of the problem, right?
Exactly. So they really liked the article, and it was slated to go in the book, and then at some point Mike Lloyd backed off and canceled the project, at which point I rewrote it into book length, which is the book that never got published, because when I finished the book length of it, Mike Lloyd wasn't interested in it, and I bounced it off a number of other publishers, and all of them were sort of interested, but not really, and this is Toppling the Pyramid, a practical guide to overthrowing the New World Order.
Mm-hmm.
Well, by this time, Jim had already sold about 6 books, and he got a call in the summer of '96 from Ron Bonds, and Ron said, "Hey, HAARP is the hottest thing on the internet right now. Can you write me a book on the subject?"
Uh-huh.
And Jim said, "No, I have 4 contracts working right now. I don't have the time, but I got a friend."
Right.
And so Jim put me in contact with Ron Bonds. We agreed to do a book on HAARP. HAARP is the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. Just so that your listeners who don't know what HAARP is a field of antennas on the ground in southeastern Alaska that is so linked together as to work as one giant antenna, and is today the world's largest radio broadcasting station, the world's most powerful radio broadcasting station, with an effective radiated power of 3.6 million watts. But it's not designed to broadcast for human ears. It's designed to inject all of that energy into a spot at the top of the atmosphere in a region called the ionosphere. Now, when you inject that much energy into the ionosphere, and let me give you a clue how much that is. In the United States, the largest legal AM radio station is 50,000 watts.
Mm-hmm.
HAARP is 72,000 50,000-watt radio stations, injecting their entire output into a spot about 12 miles across by about 2.5 miles deep by about 90 miles up. Now, when you do that, that heats that spot by several thousand degrees to the point where the molecules of the atmosphere literally explode. They are blown apart and give off a packet of energy. When you break up the molecules, they give off a packet of energy, and in this case, included in that packet of energy is a stream of ELF, extremely low-frequency radio waves, which penetrate deep into the earth and deep into the sea. And the U.S. Navy has been using HAARP for about 15 years to communicate with deeply submerged submarines. The other side of this story is that when you blow the molecules apart, you convert them into into an electrically charged gas that is called a plasma. And this plasma, because it's at the top of the atmosphere where convection can take place, it goes out into space. So you get this plume of electrically charged gas going out into space, and it keeps going out until it runs into something to stop it, which is the magnetic lines of force of the Earth's magnetic field.
Mm-hmm.
And when it reaches the magnetic lines of force, it gets trapped between them and spreads out, forming a shield of electrically charged gas that will disrupt or destroy anything passing through it, like an incoming ICBM.
Right.
HAARP is a ground-based Star Wars weapon system. Of course, the people who are operating it deny that rather vigorously.
Yeah.
So anyhow, I got a go-ahead from Ron Bonds to write a book on HAARP. I spent the summer of '96 first drafting it, sent the first draft to Ron, and he hated it and canceled the project.
Okay.
And I ended up setting on the book for a year, and then I remembered David Hatcher Childress at Adventures Unlimited Press and gave him a call, and he jumped at it because he was looking for a book on HAARP.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So there was one small problem. David wanted the final manuscript in 2 months. So I actually did 5 major rewrites of the book in 2 months to clean up the problems that Ron had seen in it. but I didn't have time to do any substantial structural changes on it. And Ron had wanted a conspiracy theory book. And indeed, my title for the book was HARP, the Ultimate Weapon, ? And Ron insisted it had to have the word conspiracy in the title, which is how it came out as HARP, the Ultimate Weapon of the Conspiracy. And when I sold it to David, David didn't even blink at the word conspiracy, didn't register on him. So that was the book he bought. That was the book he got. And it became a major bestseller. It wasn't a New York Times bestseller, but in terms of small print runs, small publishing houses, it pretty much blew doors, and was the one of the top bestsellers for this company for about 6 years.
Very good, very good. So
so we were talking about Jim.
Right.
While this was going on, of course, Jim was finishing his 12 books, which are all on UFO, conspiracy, mind control subjects. In fact, one of his books I think his best is Mind Control, World Control, which is called An Encyclopedia of Mind Control, and it is pretty much the most you can know about that subject in one cover. It's just an amazing book. And there's a section on HARP which he took from my manuscript that Ron didn't like, which I thought was kind of hilarious, that he got to rewrite me as opposed to the usual going the other way around.
Right. So I mean,
and then Jim died, and this was rather tragic. Jim was something of a psychic. He believed in a number of odd things. He and I had both been in and out of Scientology. We both spent a decade in Scientology.
Really?
After Scientology, Jim went through a Course in Miracles, and then a Scientology offshoot group called Avatar. And Jim actually worked at a psychic hotline where people would call up, and he would do psychic readings and with tarot cards, and he amazed himself at how accurate he was. He and I both have a mutual best friend, George Picard. George and I, some years after Jim's death, wrote together Secrets of the Holy Lance, The Spear of Destiny in History and Legend. Jim and George went to Burning Man, the annual art festival held in the Nevada desert.
Yeah.
And curiously, the day they left, Jim, who was doing runes at the time, did a reading and got the death rune. And he was shaken by it, but went anyhow, knowing that, absolutely convinced he was going to die from going there, which I thought was rather odd. And indeed, at one point, late, probably around 2 a.m, Sunday morning, George is a musician and had set in with a band called the Black Rock Rangers. And at some point, Jim and George realized that they're sitting on the stage where the Rangers had played, and everybody had gotten up and left, and they'd been so engrossed in talking to each other they hadn't noticed that they were the only people left, and decided, well, let's go someplace where there are people. Right. And they jumped down off the stage. George walked for a bit, turned to say something to Jim, and realized he wasn't there. Looked back, and Jim was in a pile at the bottom of the stage. He'd gone down rather hard, and Jim was unsure if he'd sprained his knee or broke his knee or what, but it hurt like heck. George got the medical, the EMT, emergency medical people to come over, take Jim to the medical tent. At the med tent, they couldn't decide whether he was broken or sprained, and recommended airlifting him into Reno. And you can almost see the dollar signs flashing across Jim's eyes at this point, because you're talking, several $1,000s to be care flighted into town. He said, no, and he talked George into driving him home, and all the way back, and from the Black Rock Desert where Burning Man takes place to Reno is about a 4.5-hour drive, and all the way back into town. George is trying to convince Jim to go to the hospital, and Jim is saying, no, I'll get over it. It took Jim 45 minutes to crawl from George's car to his living room, and then spent the next several days in the middle of his living room.
Mm-hmm.
He had 2 preteen daughters at the time, and he ordered the daughters not to call the medics, the ambulance, or anything, so they didn't know what to do, so they called his sister. Now, his sister, and I hate to say this his sister is a member of a extreme Christian religious group.
Mm-hmm.
When you join this group, you give everything you own, including your self-will, to the guru that leads the group, who speaks for God.
Uh-huh. There we go.
And they called Aunt Kathy. Aunt Kathy drove down from Portland to Reno, which took most of a day.
Mm-hmm.
She arrived on, I believe, Wednesday, found him in the middle of the floor, took one look at him and said, "You're going to the hospital, Buster." So she did call the ambulance. The ambulance took him. He got into the hospital on Wednesday, and the doctor said, now, he's been lying on the floor since dawn Sunday, and his body chemistry was off the charts, and they needed to stabilize him. The last non-medical person to see him alive was Jan, another mutual friend of ours, who came in Thursday afternoon just before he went into surgery.
Okay.
And Jan said that there were 2 physical therapists massaging his legs before they took him under. Now, This is curious in that if there were, what killed him was a blood clot.
Okay.
It would seem that these physical therapists massaged him to ensure releasing the blood clot.
Okay.
He was extremely sensitive to drugs and told the doctors that he absolutely refused to do a general anesthetic because he didn't think he'd come out of it, and insisted they had to give him a local or he was going to crawl out of the hospital. They agreed, okay, we'll give you a local. They took him in and they gave him a general. Now, the newspaper story made it sound that he died of a blood clot to the lung. The official spokesperson for the hospital said that this is a fairly common occurrence. One of the great conspiracy radio hosts is Dr. Stan Monteith.
Right.
Dr. Monteith is in his late 70s now. He worked his entire life as a medical doctor. I talked about this with Dr. Monteith, and he said that he had performed that procedure more than 32,000 times and had never lost a patient.
That's quite a lot.
There were some other curious aspects of this. The newspaper story made it sound like Jim died in the OR, but from talking to hospital employees, we discovered that he made it out of OR and was in ICU when he died. To this day, we do not know if he ever regained consciousness or not. Now, one of the peculiar aspects, is one of his major books was Black Helicopters Over America, Strike Force for the New World Order, which documents covert low-level spraying of toxic substances on people. And at one point, MSNBC sent a film crew out to film Jim, and when they got here, they discovered that Jim and I had put together a circle of writers, researchers, paranoids to help with our research, and that this circle of researchers meets every Saturday night in a local restaurant, and indeed it still meets to this day every Saturday night in a local restaurant.
Okay.
At this point, it's meeting in the banquet room at the back of the Denny's on Nugget Avenue in Sparks, Nevada. And if anybody out there wants to drop in, they'll be happy to welcome you in. They start gathering around 5. The meeting more or less gets started around 6 p.m. And this again is the Nugget Avenue Denny's in Sparks, Nevada.
Nice.
If you want to join in, just tell them I sent you. So when MSNBC heard about this group, they decided to film the group too. So they brought the cameras to the local restaurant and started filming. Somebody who was in the restaurant having dinner saw this, came over, asked what was going on, and when he learned that it was about black helicopters, he announced to the film crew, "Well, I've been in one." And they filmed him and interviewed him talking about having tripped around inside of a black helicopter.
Okay.
Well, the reason I mention